listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Week 5 preview for Monday, September 30th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, folks, Brian Blessing in Las Vegas. We heard from Jack, and now we go to the other side of the counter, talking NFL Week 5 with our good friend Bruce Marshall from the legendary publication, The Gold Sheet. A wacky Week 4, Bruce. Injuries, some weird results. It's an NFL season.
Yeah, it is. And or Conference USA, if you're looking at that Tampa Bay Rams score. I mean, that one was one of the most shocking score lines I've ever seen, Brian. When you see 55-40 involving an LA team, you think, it's a Lakers halftime score. But nah, I mean, that was the Rams score yesterday. You wouldn't think that defense would get torched like that. But also sloppiness on the Rams part. 4 costly turnovers. One of them returned for a TD by Ndamukong Suh, of all people. So that was one of the wackiest games in a wacky week. But also we're seeing, again, backup quarterbacks come in, and in many cases, they're not much worse than the starters. So that's something to think going forward, because it looks like some of those guys are going to be in there again next week.
Well, we start on Thursday with the Rams in Seattle. Workmanlike effort by Seattle, beating Arizona. Back home, and the Rams, again, you talk about the 2 games, you're like, what? I mean, literally, KC survived against Detroit. Detroit should have beat them. And the Rams, they couldn't stop a medicine ball yesterday. That was ridiculous.
I can't figure it out sometimes. And, you know, the other thing about here is the oddball thing. I mean, look at that box score at the Rams yesterday. You talk about an imbalanced attack and like a 6-to-1 pass run ratio. Jared Goff threw 68 passes yesterday. He's going to have Tommy John surgery if that keeps up. They only ran the ball 11 times. That's not the Rams. Part and parcel because of what happened on the scoreboard. They were down 21-0 before you knew it yesterday. So, and you know, this is all of a sudden now a game for first place in the NFC West. The Rams have beaten the Seahawks 3 in a row. I would expect them to bounce back here, and we'll get our next test of Seattle stepping up in class. You know, all the Seahawks, I mean, they beat the Cardinals, they beat the Bengals only by 1, they beat the Steelers barely without Big Ben. So, and they lost that game to the Saints. So we'll see if the Seahawks can do something against a top-level team. I don't think they can, but I was wrong a couple times this past weekend, so we'll see.
You brought up a great point, and I wonder if it's arrogance to a degree, or if the Rams fancy themselves Kansas City. I don't understand it. You've got good running backs. You got 3 good running backs. Oh, by the way, you got Todd Gurley, and they throw. And don't tell me it was the nature of the way the game was being played, especially the way the game was being played. The Rams should have been running the ball more to slow it down and get their defense back on the beam. It was ridiculous. Their defense was on the field the whole game.
Yeah, I am going to bet that that's going to serve as a reminder, if not a lesson, to Sean McVay, like to really pump the brakes on some of this stuff. And maybe you're right. Maybe they did get infatuated with the Chiefs' sort of offense yesterday and throwing all that. Although, I mean, at least part of it was because they were behind like that and they thought they had to come back. But that's not. Listen, even if you're down 21-0 in the first quarter, that's no reason to abandon everything. There's a lot of football to be played. There can be turnovers and things like that. You don't have to abandon the way the Rams did yesterday. McVay will be the first one to tell you that'll never happen again when he coaches, but it happened yesterday, and that should be a reminder to him and any team. You know, if you're not playing in Conference USA, you know, throwing 68 passes and running 11 times is usually a recipe for defeat.
Listen, Baltimore, Pittsburgh used to be, and we talked to Jack from Bookmaker, the home team hang 3. Here's Baltimore 3.5, 4 on the road, and we'll see what Pittsburgh brings to the table in the Monday night game against Cincy and Pittsburgh on Monday night. The one thing, though, Bruce, and we talked about this last week, Cleveland was a great play in that spot yesterday, because literally week 4, the AFC North would have been decided yesterday had Baltimore won that game, and Cleveland knew it. The division would have been gone had they not won that game, and knowing they got to play San Fran next week, who's coming off a bye. You knew you were getting Cleveland's best shot. So even in the NFL, kids are more prone to it in college football. But, I mean, that was a scheduling spot and just, I mean, a sense of urgency Cleveland had to play that game like a playoff game, and to their credit, they did.
Yeah, they did, and they won it handily. I think there's a bigger alarm here for Baltimore is what's going on with this defense now. I know the Browns have some weapons, and so does Kansas City, obviously, last week. But John Harbaugh has never coached a team in the NFL that allowed 500-plus yards in back-to-back weeks. That's what's happened to the Ravens right now. And, since that Miami game, when everything looked so good on opening week, it has not come that easy for the Ravens. And I think some of the defensive breakdowns, even irrespective of the opposition, that's not something we're used to seeing from Baltimore. We'll see this game next week. You're right. It's the dynamics are a little different. No Big Ben. Flacco's gone. That was the matchup for the last decade in that series, and usually the home team was the one that was, laying the 3. And this week, it's going to be the road team. And this has been a road series partly because the road team's usually getting a few points, and the road team has covered 5 straight, and Baltimore has not failed to cover or has not lost versus the spread at +4 at Heinz Field. But it's a different dynamic this week, and we'll just have to see how Mason Rudolph and the Steelers respond. But you're right. That's what the series trends have been the last 5 or 6 years, but this might be a new ball game in 2019.
All right, Chicago and Oakland. In England, Chase Daniel versus Derek Carr. Offense versus defense. Something's got to give. I don't know. I tell you who's not going. Vontaze Burfict suspended for the season for a helmet-to-helmet hit. Unbelievable. And he'd actually been playing very good and was a team leader for the Raiders on defense. I would just say this, Bruce, just generally speaking, no matter where these guys would play, if it was Chicago, Oakland, or in England, you're playing this thing on grass. And those England games to me are just oddball games. I'd lean to the under. I think this is going to be ugh.
Well, yeah, under's the way to go with the Bears. Circa 1940 uniforms yesterday. Those are the 73-0 Bears over Redskins championship game uniforms. Here's the other deal here. One, you're right. I think under, like we said, Bears 10-1 to the end of their last 11. This is the first NFL game in Tottenham's new stadium there. They have been playing at Wembley and at Twickenham, the rugby ground over there. Now they're playing in the brand spanking new Tottenham Stadium. So this will be the first time they've played an NFL game there. A similar sort of team in Indianapolis yesterday. It's back and forth, and I don't know that we've seen any indication the Raiders or that can put 2 decent efforts together like that. I'd lean to the Bears. And by the way, if it's Chase Daniel in there this week, they don't lose anything with him. You saw a perfect Chase Daniel yesterday, playing within himself, didn't make any mistakes. 22 of 30, 185. Don't really lose anything going from Trubisky to Daniel, if you ask me.
All right, Bruce, let's move on. Arizona and Cincinnati. We're looking at the Bengals 4.5. Total on the game is, let's call the consensus 48. It remains to be seen what happens. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I would venture a guess, and we'll revisit this one later in the week. Cincy, Pittsburgh, they don't like each other, and those are usually really, really physical football games. At first blush, I look at it, I can see these two teams going up and down the field on each other.
You could, although, Arizona really, since the fourth quarter of the open, in fact, only in the fourth quarter of the Detroit opener has this Cliff Kingsbury offense been working. I think Kingsbury's finding out the NFL is a little tougher than the Big 12. And I caught myself there. That's what I wrote in the gold sheet yesterday. The Big 12 was kind of tough for Kingsbury, too. So maybe this stuff just isn't working for him. I don't know. I think, though, the schedule, though, has been, if not working against Arizona, the matchups have been tougher. And maybe this is one they could make work a little bit this week at least. Cincinnati's rush defense has been very porous, at least the first 3 games of the season. And speaking about running the football, the Bengals ain't doing any of that when they have the ball either. They are leaning almost completely on Andy Dalton, and they're only gaining 2.4 per carry and 42 yards per game rushing into the Monday night game in Pittsburgh. I mean, that, Mike Leach's Washington State runs a lot better than that. So if they're that imbalanced, Cincinnati is going to have problems getting turning this thing around. And this actually might be a spot where Kingsbury can outscore somebody. But you're right, a lot of footballs will be in the air at Paul Brown Stadium on Sunday.
This is going to be actually fun to watch, just because it's moderately compelling with Jacksonville at Carolina, and you got the Panthers 3.5, total 41. But the backup quarterbacks, these kids have jumped in the fray and look good.
Not only that, they're going to. I have mentioned this before, and I will say it again. Nick Foles isn't getting back in the lineup for Jacksonville. This is going to be Minshew's team. I know they're playing Foles a lot, but this reminds me of Russell Wilson, his rookie year at Seattle, when they signed Matt Flynn to that big contract, and Pete Carroll realized rather quick, we got a better chance to win with Wilson. That's exactly what Doug Marrone's got here. Minshew led the Jags downfield so easily that last minute to the last second field goal after Leonard Fournette ran crazy in the second half, helping it out. That was big to discover him. I think the more intriguing thing is the other way here. Kyle Allen, they're winning with him in Carolina, and Cam Newton's out for a few more weeks with that foot injury, and that might even last a little bit longer. Well, what's going to happen if Carolina keeps winning and Cam then gets ready to play, and Ron Rivera's got to tell him, you're not playing, Cam, we're going with the other guy. Let's see if Cam is a good teammate then. I'm not so sure, but that's to worry about maybe into November. For right now, I'm on board with Minshew Mania. He has changed the dynamic completely with Jacksonville, rediscovering Fournette last week. Ride these guys. I think Minshew is something special. So is Kyle Allen the other way for what Minshew's doing and getting Fournette back in the lineup. This has re-energized Jacksonville, and I think has saved Doug Marrone's job. I think they can win this game again and become a very strong factor in the AFC South.
Let me give you some credit because you were falling on the sword. Before the season, you said the Giants aren't as bad as people think they are, but they were horrible with Eli Manning. They are a different team with Jones at the helm. Hosting Minnesota, Vikes are 5-point favorites, totals 45.5. I will say this, Bruce. I think this game, they score 60 points. Minnesota played Chicago. I think Minnesota will run the ball here. I think Cousins will have some success with Thielen and Diggs, and I think the Giants will score points. This is a track meet. If I was going to have one be my favorite on the board, it would be over 44.5 in this game.
Well, it could be. If the Vikings score 60, I think the Giants are going to score 61. I think the Giants are going to win this game. I think there's something wrong with Minnesota. This is a suicidal resolve they have to run the football. Cousins' limitations are being exposed. He's got those great wideouts that he's not using enough. And there's a real stubborn streak in Mike Zimmer. Add it all up, and you got a team sitting here 2-2. Can't win a game on the road yet. Yeah, it was a tough defense yesterday against Chicago, but we saw the same thing a couple weeks ago in Green Bay. I had a discussion. I was talking with my brother this morning. He was talking about Odell Beckham Jr. and some of the disruptions in Cleveland. And I said, I will bet you the Giants end up with a better record than the Browns this year. Daniel Jones is the real deal. You talk about absolutely turning things around. Yes, we've seen rookies do this before. Eli was demoralizing that team when he was in there. He was so bad just by doing little things like extending plays and knowing when to get rid of the ball. Jones right there is an upgrade on Eli, and those sorts of things were what really demoralized his team when Eli was in there. Now Jones is making plays. Pat Shurmur, by the way, hear this, Sean McVay, just because Saquon Barkley was out, they didn't abandon the run. In fact, they're staying just as balanced as their blueprint is using Wayne Gallman. He's not that bad. And Jones will make some mistakes, but he's making a lot more plays than Eli made too. I think they can win this one. And if you like it higher scoring, that's fine. 31-24 Giants. I think this team is full steam ahead, and the Vikings have got problems. Giants are feeling good, and that's how I think this is going to go.
New England's at Washington. If Haskins starts, New England wins this game in a lark, laying 14.5. Total on the game is 44, and I think they'll have a bounce in their step next week to get the offense rolling again, because it's been a couple-year deal now. The Buffalo defense has throttled Brady. They had one drive in that game, and to their credit, they found a way to win. The difference was in the game was a blocked punt. But I would look for New England to be highly motivated to get the offense feeling their oats again against the Washington defense.
Yeah, and I think Brady will bounce back. Buffalo's defense was so good last week. That was Tom Brady's lowest quarterback rating in 13 years in that game, 45.6, I believe it was. So, but Buffalo's defense, you can't compare it to Washington's, which is a sieve. The Giants sat on the lead yesterday. They could have probably scored more if they wanted. Okay, Haskins. Now, it's too bad. Sonny Jurgensen just retired from the Redskin radio booth this year. Had he still been working, Jay Gruden might have been tempted to call him down to the field because it's not working with these quarterbacks. Colt McCoy is still maybe available. He might be another option besides Haskins. Keenum doesn't look like he's going to get anywhere with this team. Jay Gruden is on an increasing hot seat here. It's to the point now he might as well give Haskins a shot. I don't think he gives them any less of a chance right now than Keenum would give them. And that right now, that may actually give Gruden a few more weeks. And if they show some progress with Haskins, maybe he can keep his job until the end of the season. I don't think it's going to work that way, and I don't think it's going to help them against the Patriots this week. We had it 30-7 New England. I just have a hard time seeing Washington getting into double digits if they couldn't get 200 yards against the Giants last week. So to get to 10 points would be a lot here. That's why I think maybe another under. Belichick is under 11-2 his last 13 in the regular season. And if the Redskins don't score or score very little, there's a good chance this one goes under again, with almost all the points being on New England's side.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at bettmaker.com. The Jets and Philadelphia. Philly, big numbers this week, Bruce. 14-point favorites, totals 44.5. Falk, the quarterback here. Listen, that was an impressive effort by Philly at Green Bay and extra time to prepare. And you know what it is too, Bruce? The running back by committee thing, I think, is a joke. I hate that. And Philly would do that. But they've got real weapons now with Sanders and Howard. It's not a conglomerate of okay guys. I think they got some really good running backs now.
Yeah, and if they remember to use them like they did against Green Bay, they can be pretty lethal. And so that was certainly a plus. Now, it's interesting. Here they are back at the Link this week. And I think the only the only locals there who were happy that the Eagles have only covered one of their last 9 at home are the sportsbook operators at Valley Forge and Delaware Park, where all the money comes in on the Eagles. But they haven't been covering games at home. That may well change this week. Now, obviously, the question here is Sam Darnold's status. There's a chance he might come back after missing weeks with the mono. And I've always thought, in recent weeks, people have been conflating the Jets with the Dolphins. That's not really fair to the Jets, because when Darnold comes back, they're a much better team than the Dolphins, and they'll probably win some games. But if they've got to go with Luke Falk again this week because Simeon's out, good luck. I mean, they haven't scored a touchdown with him at the helm in 6 quarters. I mean, this offense is not going to do anything until Darnold gets back, and he may not be back in time for Sunday. Too bad, because Philadelphia does have some injuries in the secondary. But in the meantime, like you said, if Philly continues to run the ball and use those weapons, that makes things a lot easier for Carson Wentz. And this is a good team to get well against. And Philadelphia's confidence. And by the way, the Jets have had a bye week, but some of that is negated because Philadelphia's off a Thursday. So it's an extra prep time for the Eagles, too. So we had it 29-10 Philly in the gold sheet. But we may alter that if we knew Darnold was in. That's not known as of yet.
Good points all. Tampa Bay is at New Orleans. Saints 4.5. 47.5, 48. I don't know about this number, Bruce. Listen, that New Orleans defense is the real McCoy, and give Tampa Bay full marks. Were they that good, or were the Rams that bad?
A little of both, but I mean, the defense, jumped in there and made plays, and I think the deal with Tampa Bay is, Jameis Winston. We've seen this before in his career, where he has really good games, then he follows it up with bad or subpar games. Here's the difference with Tampa Bay, why I would keep an eye on these guys. Yesterday you saw the Bruce Arians influence yesterday, that the guys who can make plays are featured. They made sure to get the ball into Mike Evans' hands yesterday. They ran the ball effectively, and the big guys on defense made some plays. I know the Rams scored 40 points, but Tampa Bay was playing kind of loose with that big lead. And you saw the clinching touchdown scored by none other than Ndamukong Suh yesterday. How about that? I think Tampa Bay's for real. They have won 2 of the last 4 times they've played in the Superdome, and those were wins against Drew Brees, not against Bridgewater. I think the Saints sort of saved their season here, and win these last 2 wins. Those are huge. Seattle on the road, and then against Dallas, 2 likely playoff teams. And so they're feeling good about themselves. I think the letdown might actually be on their side this week, if there is such a thing in the NFL. And I think Tampa Bay's got a shot, and they also, they've split the last 8 against the spread against the Saints. This has been a very competitive series, even though the Saints have been doing better in the standings. Tampa Bay can play with them, and Bruce Arians is making an impact. We picked the Bucks in a slight upset here, 26-24.
Well, I would say this. We're only, 4 weeks into this season, but come December, Bruce, we may look back on this, because when Brees got hurt, we said the Saints will be okay. They'll probably still win this division, and they can tread water until Brees comes back, and they'll be fine, and they'll win the division. I got news for you. They win these 2 games. They could have won the Rams game. Now they beat Dallas from a tiebreaker perspective. This is a New Orleans team that still has a real shot to get home field advantage when the playoffs get here. And we're going to be looking back at Teddy Bridgewater and them finding ways to win these games down the road. I mean, to the point where they remain Super Bowl contenders.
I agree. And even the thought a couple of weeks ago when Breeze went out is if they can hold the fort and just be like 4-4 when Breeze comes back in the end of October, early November, they'd be happy. I think right now they would think that's undershooting. I mean, they've won 2 in a row. They're 3-1 now, and Bridgewater, they're hanging in there. However, one other note here. All of a sudden, the NFC South is looking a little bit more interesting with Carolina recovering with Kyle Allen and Tampa Bay maybe being a force here. The team that's being left behind here is Atlanta, and Dan Quinn's job's in trouble. But Carolina and Tampa Bay might be able to chase New Orleans. This division is suddenly a lot more interesting than it looked a couple weeks ago.
Atlanta's at Houston, and Houston's laying 5 total on the game's 49. You called it. Houston, I don't know what to do with Houston 1 week to the next. And Atlanta is the same thing. They're a dog's breakfast. For some reason, I think this ends up being a goofy track meet kind of game. That could be saying a lot, but boy, who do you trust here?
Well, yeah, I mean, Houston, is can be vulnerable too. But they got to protect Deshaun Watson better. But I think, we talk about problems. Atlanta might be the most puzzling team in the league right now, and they're capable of coming up with a big effort. It rarely happens on the road, though, Brian. They've only covered 4 of their last 18 away from Mercedes-Benz in the regular season. And all these changes that they made in the offseason are not working. It is especially true in the first half of these games. This is what I think could really get Dan Quinn in some trouble. His team is really getting outscored in the first quarter and the first half. It's looking like they're not prepared when they come out for the games. They're not prepared as they should be. And they're digging themselves a hole. And that sort of thing, if it keeps recurring, Brian, you've said this before too, that comes back to coaching if you're not ready right at the outset. And that's hurting the Falcons and their inability to stop the run consistently and their inability to use their weapons offensively, including the running backs, is hurting Matt Ryan a bit. No touchdown passes last week for the first time in a long while. For Ryan, I think they get the dog's breakfast is really Atlanta now. I mean, it's the NFL. Anything can happen, but they're more inconsistent than Houston, and I think they're in some trouble here. 27-17, we took the Texans. Dan Quinn's job is going to be on the line here really soon, and unless they turn it around, I don't think prospects are good for him lasting into next year.
All right, then we get Buffalo at Tennessee. Tennessee is 2.5-point favorites here. Total on the game is 38.5. Question mark whether Josh Allen can go. But don't sleep on Matt Barkley. He can play. He moved the ball as good as Allen did yesterday and got hit when he got intercepted at the end of that game. But it's about Buffalo's defense. They played their lungs out in that game. And Tennessee, that defense can fly around. Points will be at a premium in this game. But I think Singletary could play for the Bills.
Yeah, that would help. And, it's still going to be a defensive game, so I can see under. It's not a high total, but you could see this thing being under, which has been a pretty good way to look with the Bills. Marcus Mariota, here's the key. I mean, last week, again, they got the running game going with Derrick Henry, 100 yards rushing, but that was against Atlanta last week. That helps Mariota a lot. I mean, he has been very inconsistent, and putting 2 games together for him is asking quite a bit. You're very right about Matt Barkley. This is sort of like the Chicago situation. They come in with Chase Daniel. I don't think there's that much of a drop-off in Chicago, and there's not much of a drop-off here, at least yet. So as much as I like Josh Allen, I mean, he's still early in the learning curve here. We remember bringing Matt Barkley almost off the street last year when the Bills were having all the quarterback issues, and he led the 41-10 win. Yeah, 41-10 over the Jets, and we saw him almost pull out the game against the Patriots yesterday. They don't lose anything if they have to go with Barkley, and they've got that defense and Tennessee's inconsistency here. They are not going to establish Derrick Henry, at least the way they did against the Falcons yesterday. That's putting the pressure on Mariota. And I think the Buffalo defense rises to the occasion and leads the Bills to a very important win here, get them to 4-1. 21-13, we took Buffalo in this one. That's a featured gold sheet pick this week. I think they can't feel too bad about the New England game. They wanted to win, but they showed they could play with them, and I think they will show they can beat the Titans on Sunday.
Bruce, you want to talk about the importance of a game. If we're going to sit there and talk about New Orleans down the road, this is a game that we'll look back of all games. As goofy as this may sound, this is a game I think we'll be talking about in December. I think these two teams, along with the Chargers and possibly the Colts, are the 4 I've identified fighting for the 2 wild card spots. This is a huge game. I think the winner of this game down the road, we're going to say that was the one put them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. And the way the AFC is sort of setting up now, it's very important, for Tennessee to have won that game yesterday. And Buffalo is hanging in there really good. The defense covers up covers up the cracks. And if you've got a defense like the Bills have, they're going to be in every game this year. So I'm still bullish on Buffalo, more so than I am with Tennessee. And it comes back to Mariota again. He has been very erratic. And I still think he's 1 or 2 bad games away from getting pulled and they go to Ryan Tannehill. I'm not a Mariota fan. I'd rather have the Bills in this one.
Few more with Bruce Marshall. Denver at L.A. The Chargers are 6.5, 43.5. Bruce, your Broncos. Man, how many different ways can you get punched in the stomach?
I know, and a couple thoughts. By the way, you should have heard me on Denver radio on Saturday morning. I sounded like Mark Levin going off on the Broncos there and the situation the whole way through, from the ownership fiasco to Elway to Vic Fangio, the whole thing. Listen, this defense isn't that good. If you allow the Jags to get 340 yards in the second half, and Leonard Fournette to run for almost 200 in the second half, and not able to stop a last-minute drive for Jacksonville, just like with Chicago a couple weeks ago, they're just not that good. Flacco, a couple plays yesterday, but it wasn't enough. And here's another thing. I hearken back, and since I remember all the Bronco games, from like the back of my hand, 2008, this is the difference between a guy like Mike Shanahan and Vic Fangio. Denver had a game early that season when Jay Cutler was still there. Back and forth against the Chargers, and Shanahan was realizing late in the game, we can't stop Phillip Rivers. The Broncos had the ball down 7. He said, our only way to win this game is if we can bleed the rest of the clock and score with less than 15 seconds left and then get the 2-point conversion. And they planned the whole last drive around that. Denver yesterday, great. They come downfield and Flacco throws a touchdown pass with 1:30 left to go up by 1. Guess what? You left Jacksonville a lot of time to come back downfield. Those are the little nuances that a guy like Vic Fangio, it's just beyond him. And that's why the Broncos are losing games like this now. And that's at home against teams they should beat. On the road, they haven't been close. And I don't think they're going to get close here. Melvin Gordon will play this week for the Chargers. He's back in the fold. They actually lost to the Case Keenum Vance Joseph Broncos in Carson last year. That has not been a great home field for the Chargers. But with Gordon back, the fact they lost to Denver last year, and they're fighting in Denver now, and there's going to be guys wanting out pretty soon. Chris Harris is already counting the days till the season is done. He's going to go on the market. Emmanuel Sanders, they may want to trade him. If they trade Sanders, they won't win more than 2 games this year. This is a mess. Chargers 26-13. I don't want Denver until further notice.
But I appreciate so much what you just said. The funny thing, because people, you got to score. You got to score. And it's like, I was saying the same thing, and they didn't score. So somebody would shoot this back at me. But we were watching the game. Usually watch the games with us on Sundays. And our friends that you know. And there was one guy that had come from Buffalo, and Barkley's taking him down the field. And I said, let the clock run. Like, they're don't rush. Let the clock run. It's like, if you can get down there and get the field goal, so be it. Obviously, the touchdown will be better, but the goal is score with 7 seconds left. Because if you leave Brady 40 seconds left, he's going to come back and beat you. You have to think of those things.
Yeah, and that's what Denver's not. That's what Fangio and Denver, the Denver brain trust, it's beyond them right now to do that. And that's where a coach. Now, I didn't see Shanahan. I mean, you have to be in that position to do it. But I'm going back a ways here, talking about Mike Shanahan, 2008, his last year in Denver. But he knew back then, and I would, Belichick, guys like that who have a sense for the game know. And that's oftentimes the difference between winning and losing. By the way, the Broncos won that game 39-38 back in 2008, and they lost the game yesterday. And I go back to it's using the clock properly, and they didn't do it yesterday. It seems odd, but that's true, and it certainly bit the Broncos in the back end yesterday.
All right, let's get to the Cowboys game. And we're looking at the Cowboys laying 3.5 against Rodgers and the Packers. Total in the game is 47.5. You know what, Bruce? It's amazing to me. What do we say? as long as I've known, you've been here a lot longer than me. I got here in 2005. But one of the first things you learn, it's almost like betting 101, don't go overboard with what you last witnessed. And it's like they're ready to throw a parade for the Cowboys. They're a really good football team. They're a very good football team. They beat the Giants, the Redskins, and the Dolphins, and they're talking about them like they're a gut cinch to win the Super Bowl. It's like, calm down. They're a good team. I'm telling you, I was half joking with a buddy of mine who's an annoying Cowboys fan. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, go ahead. Let Prescott go, have one more big game, and then go give him $38 million a month, and watch he doesn't turn into Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick had a hot month with the Bills, got a $64 million contract. It's like, come on. Prescott's a nice quarterback. He's no great shakes.
Two things, Brian. One, in reference to your friend, all Cowboy fans are annoying. So there you go. Second, what you say is true. And who listened to you or had the same mindset other than Jerry Jones? Because a lot of people thought after Dak put up all those great numbers against the Redskins and the Dolphins and the Giants when Eli was there the first 3 weeks, he's got to have Jerry over a barrel in this contract negotiation. Not really. Jerry's they're maybe pulling further apart right now. And Jerry's pumped the brakes because he knew exactly what you said. Let's wait to see how Dak does against some better competition. Now, Dallas was in that game last night. They still could, but they couldn't win. That was their toughest game of the year. Now, this is another tough one, certainly tougher than the first three. Green Bay also is off a loss here. I wonder, we went back to talk about Sean McVay earlier on, and that got so distorted toward the pass run ratio yesterday. That was sort of a learning lesson for McVay, I think. I am thinking some of the play calling Green Bay around the goal line last night it was a case of Matt LaFleur, maybe Rodgers, just trying to be a little bit too cute. Get down there. I mean, don't forget you've got some running backs who can get you yards. You can use those guys too. So maybe Green Bay will take heed. I will say this. Rodgers looks like he is getting a little bit more comfy in LaFleur's offense, 422-yard passing against the Birds the other night. That was by far his biggest passing game of the year. So that might be coming together, and Green Bay's defense does look better than it did a year ago. The Smith guys they got as edge rushers have been much more productive than Clay Matthews and Nick Perry were last year. So I think Green Bay's got some more playmakers on defense and can go in here and win. This game is not in Lambeau, so Cowboys fans are going to be spared watching TV reminders of past postseason nightmares on the frozen tundra. But they've still got to deal with Aaron Rodgers this week. It's in Dallas, but he's won a lot of games in the road. He's won down there before, including the playoffs a few years ago. 28-21 Green Bay. We took the Packers to win this one on Sunday.
Kansas City's hosting Indy, Bruce, 9.5. They're favored at home at Arrowhead. Total on the game is 57. You know what? At the end of the day, Detroit should have beat Kansas City. I mean, right there in a nutshell, it's why you play the game. And is Detroit played their lungs out, should have won handily, and found a way to lose that football game. Conversely, it sounds like a sports cliche, but it's true. Good teams find ways to win. Kansas City, they didn't show up for that game, and they found a way to win.
Yeah, and that game yesterday, that reminded me of that Denver-KC game on Monday night, right about this time last year. And Denver should have won the game. They led for much of the way, and sure enough, Mahomes pulled it out right at the end. So the Lions they got the week off here, but don't feel too cocky just because you came close. You got to win a game like that. That's the difference between these teams, and you're absolutely right. Chiefs find ways to pull things out like that. If there is a concern, though, and this is recurring for the Chiefs, I mean, this sort of restructured defense doesn't look a lot better than it was last year. They're allowing almost 6 yards per carry, and Indy would prefer, to balance the offense some with Marlon Mack. I think they may have some success doing that. Brissett's numbers were not too bad yesterday. They got burned by some big plays by the Raiders. That can certainly happen against the Chiefs. This is where the Colts season ended last January in the playoffs. In the division round, as the Chiefs won 31-13. I think there'll be more points scored in this one, and I think Indianapolis will put up a pretty good fight. They're in every game, even though they've lost 2 of them, but those have been, by close margins, Chargers and Raiders. I think this will be kind of close, too. We had a 35-30 Chiefs in the Gold Sheet. We're going to go over that high total. But that Chiefs defense almost guarantees that the Mahomes and company have got to be kicking on every week to make sure they finish ahead.
And we wrap it up, Bruce. Monday Night Football, Cleveland at San Francisco. Niners 3.5, 47.5. I think you might see threes here eventually. This is a hard one to call. I was really comfortable with Cleveland having to play Baltimore like it was a playoff game because the division would have been decided. In week 4, the division would have been decided. To their credit, they went in there with a real sense of urgency. Now it's a non-conference game, a team coming off a bye, but at the other side of the coin, Bud, I look at San Fran going, the last thing in the world they wanted was a bye. So early in the year when you're winning, it almost derails momentum. This is a tough one to call.
Well, your last point, I think, is the key one here. I think it's even more key than Cleveland. Actually, I think, traveling across country, getting an extra day might actually work to the Browns' benefit this week. They won a game on the road. They've won a couple games on the road. They won on Monday night a few weeks ago, so they're in New York against the Jets at MetLife, so they're used to this sort of stuff. And I think they've got the weapons to make it work if their mind is at it. But you're right, the 49ers, they did not want a bye week. They would have rather had the bye week come in November if they could. Winning 3 in a row, and especially the way they won that last game. They did not play that well against the Steelers, but there is the old thing. I mean, if you commit 5 turnovers and you still win, I mean, this is a win league, so you're getting the money. But they got to tighten things up if they want to move forward and win those sorts of games. You're not going to win every week, turning over 5 times. You're certainly not going to beat these guys with all their firepower on the other side. I mean, really? I mean, at the start of the season, maybe we overrated the Browns, but I'm not sure anybody would have made the 49ers the favorite here. And I'm still not sure they really should be. I mean, Cleveland might be a better team. But I kind of subscribe to your notion there that the 49ers are going to regret having that bye week, and it kind of took that early momentum away from them. We took Cleveland 29-24 in the sheet.
Well, there you go. Good stuff. And later in the week, we'll dive into the college football scene with our good friend Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. Great information, Bruce. As always, have a good week.
Thanks, Brian. Talk to you later in the week.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at bettmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At bettmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.